Hi, this is Francis from Easel, and today I wanted to talk about an issue I was having with my machine recently and how I fixed it. I'm just going to kind of talk you through what the issue was, show you what my machine was doing, and then talk about how I resolved that issue, and then some steps to take to make sure that when you go through these troubleshooting steps, you're resolving it in the correct way. What was happening was I was carving this project here, and as I was carving it, I noticed that my machine wasn't moving accurately to the dimension that I wanted. So it seemed like it was moving fine on the y-axis and depth-wise on the z-axis, but on the x-axis, it looked like it was moving smaller than it should. And so I stopped the carve, took a look at my machine, made sure where the lead screws connect to the motors was tight, made sure things looked like they were moving okay and not stopping or halting or anything like that. Everything seemed to be working fine. So then I went into Easel, and one of the really kind of easy checks for checking machine movement is to go into the jog controls, change the interval for the axis that you're checking to 1, and that'll move it an inch. Put a ruler up against that axis, and then just jog it an inch and see what happens. And when I did that, I saw that my x-axis was actually moving a quarter of an inch. And I'm going to show you that here. I'm going to jog it. I'll put a little video at the bottom of the screen here, and you'll be able to see what it looks like when it's jogging that inch. So I'm going to jog it. And as you can see, when it jogs that inch, it's actually jogging a quarter inch against the ruler. And so to me, that says that maybe my steps per millimeter setting is wrong. And so to fix that, I can go into Easel, or I can go into Easel and click on Machine and Machine Inspector. And down here, we can see that there are a bunch of different firmware settings here on my machine. And the ones that I'm looking for here are specifically these three: $100, $101, and $102. 100 is the x-axis steps per millimeter, 101 is the y-axis steps per millimeter, and 102 is the z-axis steps per millimeter. And as we can see, my $100 is 200.00 instead of the other two, which are 800.002. And so to me, that indicated that there might be something wrong with my steps per millimeter. Maybe it was not jogging correctly because of that setting. So I decided to do a little quick calculation to figure out how to adjust my steps per millimeter. And I think the easiest way to think about it is, if your machine is set to 200, a 200 value for your steps per millimeter, and it's moving a quarter of an inch, if you multiply 200 by 4, ideally that's going to make it move an inch. So in this case, 200 multiplied by 4 is 800. So I went in and I changed my $100 value to equal 800, which coincidentally matches the values for the other two. And then when I exit out of here, I can go back into the machine inspector and I can just verify that that change has been made. Here I can see that $100 equals 800 now. And then I went and I jogged my machine against the ruler again at an inch, and we'll be able to see that change. Now it's moving closer to that inch, which is what I wanted initially. So an important thing to know about changing your steps per millimeter is, I think the most important thing is exactly how much you need to change it by. And I think take the distance that it's moving up against the ruler and then try to turn that into a fraction. So let's say it's jogging, like, let's say the setting is 100 and it's jogging 1/8 of an inch. At that point, you'd want to multiply that by 8, and then you'll get your value for jogging an inch. And so I think that's the really important thing to remember, is it's not like really tricky, but you want to make sure that the value that it currently is, you multiply that by whatever you need to get that inch by turning it into a fraction, be that a 16th, 32nd, 1/8 inch. Typically, you won't see it move less than like 1/8 of an inch, or I in my technical support experience, haven't seen anything move less than 1/8 of an inch. If it does, there's probably something else going on, maybe some sort of hardware issue. So that's a little bit more about changing your steps per millimeter. But one thing I want to mention about this specific task or this specific thing is that before you kind of pinpoint the steps per millimeter as the issue, I would recommend just checking all the mechanical parts on your machine, making sure everything's moving correctly. I would also recommend checking with your hardware provider before trying to change the steps per millimeter, because on the offhand that it is a firmware setting, they'll be able to give you that firmware that you need or the firmware settings that they recommend, and that's a good starting point. And oftentimes will fix the issue. But also, your machine provider might have more information on what's going on, and changing your steps per millimeter is really more of a last resort. More of just kind of, if something's going on, that's what you would change, but you'd want to check a couple of other things first. But that's a little bit more about how to change your steps per millimeter. Have a wonderful day.
To learn more, head over to easel.com.